Hi, this is Paul. So in yesterday's video, I talked quite a bit about, used a bunch of stuff from the Like Stories of Old channel, which is a channel I really like. I used mostly The Worst Is Yet to Come, which I thought was just a tremendous video. It's gotten a good amount of attention, and also how modern audiences are failing cinema. I might do a video on Man Created Image, Image Created Man, which is his most recent one. That might have been the one that he was sort of talking about on Twitter about the audience didn't like it. But again, I thought it was a tremendous video. Where we sort of ended
And in fact,
in the this had a very clear four-part structure, how modern audiences are failing cinema. And in his last section, he talks about towards true nourishment and, basically expressed his hope that the artistic value of cinema, which is revelatory, and again, it's revelatory in a way. This is like beauty. Who was talking about beauty? Was it Pajot or Vervaeke? It was Vervaeke. It was Vervaeke talking to Jonathan or Jordan. But beauty is this revelatory means which isn't fundamentally propositional. And that, of course, is the way that art reveals. And it leads to the fact that he sees cinematic art as true nourishment. And the point that I made towards the end of that video was I appreciate the way that he's got optimism for that, but what we've seen with technological disruption is that medium is disrupted by medium is disrupted by medium, which is disrupted by medium. And cinema, what is the golden age of cinema? Movie theaters are struggling to make money. They're in competition with big screens in the house. They're in competition with streaming services, and they're in competition with our smartphones and YouTube. And I mentioned previously that I'm waiting for Amazon and Netflix and the big video streamers to get into the user content market, because increasingly YouTube, once it got onto the smart TV, and of course, I have a Sony TV, and so I have a Google TV, which I didn't want. Actually, the TV before that, I had an old Panasonic Plasma, which I preferred because you just plug and unplug the boxes from the thing. I gave that TV to my daughter. But then we got a nice OLED Sony, and because my wife wanted it on the wall, she didn't want anything underneath. She didn't want any more boxes, and I was like, the problem with the smart TV is that the smarts get outdated and they get slower because it's basically a computer in there. And basically my old Panasonic Plasma was not going to get outdated because it just had, well, it was lower resolution, but it wasn't 4K, but it just had the HDMI connector, and I could play whatever box I wanted. But my wife wanted fewer wires, etc., cleaner look, aesthetics. Okay, fair enough. Gotta keep the wife happy. So went to a smart TV. And then, of course, once you get to the smart TV, I could play YouTube and those kinds of things on the various little boxes. But once I had this smart TV, I just see how Google is just reaching its hand around set. It's like, it's strangling set in some ways, at least the set that I grew up with. So I'm less convinced than Tom Vanderlinde, another Dutchman. I'm not a real Dutchman, he is. I'm less convinced that cinema won't be disrupted into just basically an art house artistic form, and the the divide that he talked about, just sort of the popcorn movies, the shallow, more entertainment movies, just basically becoming the focus of the industry because, of course, that's where a lot of the money is. And everything follows the money. So that's where I left off with yesterday's video. Now, this video came up, Algo, again, if you saw my membership video that I posted this morning, I'm trying to, the machines are with us. They're not going anywhere. And either we figure out how to destroy the machines or ban the machines or block the machines or exile the machines, or we have to figure out how we're going to live with the machines. And, we'll see. This video, what happens now is that we all hate our smartphones. And the thesis of this video, I've never watched any of this guy's content before, so we'll see if he lets me play this. I hope he does. Smartphones are... And again, he's like, well, smartphones are becoming uncool, and that's where most of the video is about, because people are getting these... I remember Father Eric at the Chino conference, at the Washington, D.C. conference, showed me his phone. It was a little phone that had an e-ink screen, and of course, smartphones are competing for battery life, but the old phone that I had before the smartphone, that battery would last almost a week. But yet, they had crappy cameras. And so I think, again, as we get into the point that he's making about the smartphone, maybe we'll just start with his beginning, because he starts out with this nice throw quote.
How did our smartphones go from something amazingly cool to something that everyone hates?
It's a feeling that I get sometimes when I use my phone excessively, and the only way I can describe this feeling is the feeling of guilt.
This is what my minimalistic phone setup looks like.
This is the dumb phone.
Dumb phone sales are up. My parents' 2006 digital camera is now peak coolness. The anti-smartphone movement is just getting started. And this movement is gonna change technology probably even more than AI. Because it all starts from one simple idea. What will happen when using a smartphone becomes uncool, just like smoking? And we're gonna...
Now, I'm not convinced, because the smartphone has so much utility, and I think what we're going to see is recalibration of phones and a diversity of phones, because people want the all-day battery life, they want a good camera, they want to limit. I severely limit notifications on my smartphone. I definitely do not allow YouTube or Twitter or anything like that to serve me up notifications on my smartphone. Google is always trying to open up that notification business, but I want my phone pretty severely impaired, but I want to be able to do things with it that I want to do with it. And one of the things that he talked about in here is the loop. And I thought this was really helpful because, maybe we'll start a little bit earlier. Now, a lot of this, of course, has to do with reining in our appetites, because we've just been giving so much more opportunity. But at the same time, those on the other sides of the screens have known a fair amount about human addiction, and increasingly they try to make whatever they want more and more addicted. Now, what he lays out here is sort of management by objective, and in a lot of ways did a lot of thinking about that back when that hit church. That hit church in the 80s and 90s and aughts with the seeker movement. The seeker movement was basically church plus management by objective. And during the 80s and 90s, everybody thought, well, the objective of the church is to get more baptisms, more commitments to Christ, more. And then, of course, Willow Creek continued to refine that. And eventually that went into the Reveal study that Willow Creek did, because what was happening is that they were applying management by objective to the church, but in many ways the church continued to defy warping it to the machine, because every time, Willow Creek would have, fully devoted followers of Christ, that was sort of their objective. So the book that came out from the Reveal study was called Move, What 1,000 Churches Reveal About Spiritual Growth. And what they tried to do was say, okay, the job of the church is to, again, management by objective, the job of the church is to deliver on spiritual growth. So that now we have to define what spiritual growth is. And the seeker movement and evangelicalism has always been really high on social sciences and in some ways on social engineering. And so they really tried to figure out, okay, this is what spiritual growth is. We can measure it. And so we have to ask ourselves if our systems are delivering spiritual growth to our customers or to our clients. Aaron Wren just put out a tweet. Every time I read a book that talks about historic Protestantism, like James Davidson Hunter's Democracy and Solidarity, it strikes me how alien that Protestant culture is to today's evangelical culture. Historic Protestant culture, particularly of the Calvinist variety that was so shaped America, was ascetic, shunning excess consumption with an ethic of hard work and very disciplined, productive life. It was individualistic, but shaped towards public good. It valued higher education and accomplishment. Today's evangelicalism is aligned with American consumer culture, prizes leisure as much as work. It's purely populist and sectarian. It's skeptical about higher learning and elite accomplishments. It's not contiguous with even mainline Protestantism, much less classic Protestantism, while religion will always reflect the culture and folk ways of the time. This should be indication that evangelicalism is off base in some key ways. It's worth reflecting on that. So, of course, there's a ton there, a lot of which I've talked about before. But the seeker movement in many ways captured a lot of evangelicalism, by no means all of it. But then, of course, the seeker movement thought that they could just keep doing this to other levels of, they could do it to successive generations. They didn't realize just how much seeker culture was built, what boomer culture was built into the seeker movement. And so they fell completely flat on their face when it came to trying to apply what they thought were these universal principles to Gen Xers. Now, management by objective is alive and well. And it's sort of like the conversation about modernity, about emissarianism, about sort of this left brain approach to the world of distilling the world down into bricks, into Amazon boxes, into all sort of little distinct things that we can put together, and then we can figure out how it all works, and there it goes. And the recession of modernity, counter-enlightenment, however you want to describe it, is all about that. The fact that the further we got, the more we realized, yeah, there are areas of life where you can really sort of boil things down into mechanical processes, but the mastermind, the bigger picture shows that life is far more complex. Yet, other areas of business have yet to find this, because if you can turn something into a money-making machine, people will do it because people like money. And the reason people like money is money in many ways sort of crosses the gap. You can sort of count it, and it's so fungible that money is just this powerful thing. It is an astounding thing that Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount says you can't serve two masters. And he doesn't say God and Satan. He says God and mammon. And mammon, some modern translations will say money. It's not a perfect translation of mammon, but it isn't necessarily bad. Now we come to the smartphone, and the reason I'm interested in the smartphone is because, remember Game B and all those conversations, the killer illustration that really sort of gave me a vision for what they were talking about was in fact the smartphone. Because the smartphone comes around in 2007, Steve Jobs, you have these Microsoft smartphones, and you have these other smartphones, and you have Blackberries and things like that with little keyboards. But Steve Jobs is like, no, we don't need a stylus, we have our fingers. And they create an operating system, and they create a whole way of interacting with the phone. And of course, Google quickly rushed in with the Motorola. What was that name? I had that phone. It both had the fold-out keyboard, and it had Android that was getting more and more finger-friendly. Before that, Android was sort of trying to copy Microsoft. Google often is a copier, but very quickly, the smartphone revolutionized the world in amazing ways and in bad ways. Soon everybody had a camera. And so when there was police brutality, or there's a pretty sunset, or there was a family event, or a new child, everybody had a decent phone, and that could be quickly uploaded. So smartphones brought in social media, et cetera, but also there was porn in everybody's, at least potentially, and a whole lot of people's hands where it wasn't before. And I mean, smartphone just went whoosh. And now again, back to like stories of old where where he's basically saying, well, these disruptions in cinema, we'll get over this and we'll get back to cinema being the popular, cultural, world-shaping, powerful art form that it's been. And my thinking is, that's not how a lot of things have gone. We still have books, we still have newspapers, we still have radio, we still have all sorts of different things. Blogging sort of comes back again with Substack, but the pattern of technological disruption is way, way, way more complex. And the fact that many of these iconostasis movie channels have noted that we don't make the kind of movies we made in the 80s and 90s. We make different kind of movies. And in fact, the genre keeps evolving. And it doesn't mean that the genre is probably going away completely, but watching something on a 6-inch screen is a very different thing from watching it on a giant screen with a whole communal group of people. So let's jump into this here.
Smartphones just serve it best right now. But the invasive and addictive media of today has one key difference with TV or MySpace or even the Facebook I was using in 2010. And it's Viz, the loop. Viz Loop is how tech products are built. Basically, all software products are built with Viz. From big tech to TikTok to a 2-people startup in a moldy basement. And Viz is the key. So get ready for a crash course on how digital products are actually built in 40 seconds. So you have your app, you have designers and engineers, but what should your team work on? We could build a dark mode, improve the algorithm, add a new AI chatbot. We have an endless list of ideas, but how do you decide what to build? What we need is called a North Star, an objective that's measurable, a number. If we are, say, Google Maps...
There it is, the management by objective. And again, with the Secret Church, that management was... Well, first it was, more baptisms, more conversions. And again, what happened with the Seeker movement is that every particular tradition sort of had to grapple with, well, what exactly is the North Star? Can we define it tighter? And of course, fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ was Willow Creek's thing. But then, of course, with the Reveal study, it's like, well, wait a minute. And then they discovered that actually, after years of revolutionizing the church and changing the world, when they would sort of boil spiritual maturity down into particular behaviors, they discovered that's not what we're putting out. And in fact, churches are constantly talking about these things. Are we making people more busy? Because if you just swallow up everybody's time, and this conversation here is darn dyslexia. There it is. It's so counterintuitive because it's over there for me, but it's over there on the screen. Churches, well, we're just swallowing up people's time. And they also need to be good family people. They need to have time for their children. They need to have time for other civic duties. If we wrap them up completely in church work, they can't do evangelism because all of their friends are only in church. And so churches just went round and round and round and round with this management by objective because we need a really clear objective, and then we need to understand how all the little cause and effect things, and then we can hit this objective, and then Jesus comes again. This is how we prime the pump for the eschaton.
We can put here the number of kilometers traveled maps, and this is what we want to grow. So we take our ideas and we start building the ones that we think will increase this number the most. So, for example, let's build a new dark mode so you don't get blinded by your phone when you're driving at night. Then we can immediately test it with millions of people around the world and see whether it actually improves the North Star. If it does, we release it to everyone and on to the next one. Now, this is
And again, with smartphones and software rollouts, where I remember a number of years ago when they just basically opened the window on what exactly Google and Apple are, the data that they are getting from your smartphone. It's an enormous, it's how your phone is positioned. It's whether it's not whether you click on something, it's whether you pause over something. I mean, they're assembling all of this data, so then they're just, back when Philip Morris was trying to figure out, well, just how much nicotine can we deliver in these cancer sticks? Well, the smartphones have taken that up to an incredible thing, and so they just keep refining the addictions and the slavery.
Big simplification, but this is how tech works. This is what I do in my job as a product manager. And around 2012, social media and media companies in general, including Netflix, YouTube, Spotify, well, they have realized that here, the best metric they can put was time and engagement. They discovered that if they optimize,
because of course, time is money. Saying long before tech.
for time, they can basically print money with ads or subscriptions. They found a direct correlation between increasing time and increasing the revenue. And so the race for optimizing for your time was on, and all the other apps follow suit. Now, this loop is not inherently evil. It's just a really effective way to build tech products. And all it does is build things that optimize for the North Star. But when the North Star is trying to take over all of your users' time, well, that's where this whole mess starts. This is Chamath Palihapitiya. He worked directly with Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook during those years, and he basically pioneered this time-sucking loop. And this is what he has to say about it.
I feel tremendous guilt. I think in the back, deep recesses of our minds, we kind of knew something bad could happen.
And I probably shouldn't mention it, but even this very video is optimized for keeping you here. I'm using music and text and images and hopefully an interesting story so that you will watch.
And now, again, I like my nice camera with the bokeh. I have to have decent sound, although I do have that fan blowing at me. The dog is laying in front of the fan. But that's part of the reason I just didn't want to do all that stuff. You know, I don't want to edit. I don't want to play music in the background. I don't want to write a script. I don't want to do any of those things. But the point he makes here, you know, like and subscribe, the real key on YouTube.
Watch it until the end. Why? Well, not because I like it, but because YouTube is also playing this time game. And if I want to tell this story, I need to create something that people want to watch until the end. So in reality, the best way to support your favorite creator is not actually liking their video or subscribing to their channel, is actually to watch the video until the end. But after 15 years of this loop building products that take more and more of your time, people are starting to have enough. Especially younger people that have been exposed much more to the effects of this are saying, you know what, this is too much, I want my time back. And even though it is not the real problem, there's only one thing that people could do. Declare war on the smartphone. Dumb phone sales are up.
And again, it's spy versus spy. I always say spy versus spy, or I say it enough. And a lot of you don't know what I mean. Look up Spy versus Spy, Mad Magazine. It's just an arms race between us and the machines. And of course, the machines are driven by money. Now, Karen and Clara, I thought, had an outstanding conversation. And what's interesting about whatever it is we're doing here, and wherever here is I think speed and time. I've often noted the comments that come about whenever I do a video that for whatever reason or another, Algo sends it further out into the mainstream. And then I get the comments of, this guy talked for 3 minutes and he never got to the point. That's like, well, you might get one after an hour and a half. Might. And again, I should drop Chris Green's video in here. But to actually have and establish and to maintain a community of people who go through time and can actually, suss out, not just talk about these things, because part of what we live in a world. I made a video a while ago that talked about sophisticated versus Christians versus simple Christians, because as a pastor, I've often met people who they are not sophisticated. They do not have an IIQ. They have not read a lot of books. On whole ranges of things, you can find them indistinguishable from whatever religious, spiritual background noise there is in the culture being fed to them through Christian or secular media, yada, yada, yada. But On other frames of reference, they have managed to, that person is having a hard time. They have shown up for them.
Yes, this is exactly it, Paul. This is, I think this is what I've been trying to get at for the last 30 minutes of our conversation or more. Like, let's take that pattern, like that sophisticated and simple. What I've learned, and I've learned it in all kinds, I mean, I'm happy to give examples of this, is that very often the sophisticated ones are the ones who've piled up simplifying formulas. So they're sophisticated in that they've got a lot of stuff in their head. But what most of the stuff that's in their head is techniques for simplifying the world. And what you have in many cases with people who are simple is that they've learned to live in ways that are open to the real complexity of life. So, like, I'll give you one example of this. I mean, I've taught in a lot of different places, from universities and seminaries and small Bible schools, churches, tiny churches. And one of the things I've learned over the years is that the people you would expect to be most open and teachable rarely are. And the people that you would predict would be the hardest to teach and the most likely to argue aren't. The very many times, I mean, many times in my life, I've walked into a setting expecting, okay, these people, they're not going to want to hear what I have to say. And these are, again, we're not talking about people who have advanced degrees or have read theology or ever engage in that conversation. But when I bring it up, if I'm able to show how this bears on their life in some way, I don't mean it's practical, but I mean, this matters for the way that you pray. This matters for the way that you read scripture. They're ready. They have many times they have more skills for that conversation than my fellow academics do. And that's what I've been trying to get at, right? That this sophistication very often is a way of actually simplifying things that does violence to the world. And not always, but sometimes, at least the wisest of the people who are living this simple life have a knack for the real complexity of life that makes them more gracious, more patient, more open than I think a lot of academic training has made a lot of us. That's getting close to the concern I've been trying to name here.
Because part of what we're trying to figure out is, where is this going? What is AI going to do? And I mentioned AI might kill the machine. And I think this video is the video about, we're going to recalibrate the smartphone, because we're not dumb creatures. And we feel something exploding over our life, and you're going to have just a classic distribution in terms of some people are going to get rid of it completely. Other people are going to succumb to it completely. Most people are going to be sort of in the middle somewhere, and there's going to be continual recalibration about it. But I was talking, Annie Crawford, who was on Christian's channel. I haven't watched her conversation with him. I should, because I know she's been, a number of people have recommended, Richard Rollard had recommended that I talk to her. At some point we'll talk. I've been playing with Notebook LM and trying to say, okay, how does this work in my workflow? Can this be a good tool that I use to try to, well, it's not going to make my videos for me, but it can help me sort of manage between Algo and all of you that make recommendations for things to watch. It's a lot, and I don't have enough time to watch it all or pay enough attention to it. And so the question is, well, can I use this tool to sort of get things down? And so she said, Paul Vanderklay tempted me trying Notebook LM. Here's the AI summary of my talk this weekend. Pretty accurate. AI could have written the talk, but it can be, couldn't have written the talk, but it can be useful for source and summarize. And that really brought me back to Chris Green's comment of hopefully the clip I decided to put in here, if I remember to put it in here. But AI is good at, okay, here's all these words. And now, by virtue of math and language models, of course, it's dumb. It has no understanding of the meaning of all of this. And again, I thought Mark Vernon's review of Bentley Hart's recent book was quite good and quite helpful, because AI won't understand the meaning of this, but it can sort of ape us by looking at frequency of words, et cetera, et cetera. That's how language models work. And so the machine is going to continue to fool us and addict us and deceive us. But and what's interesting is I thought what's really going to happen is we're going to have the loss of these experts. Because as Chris Green noted, what experts have really managed to do is basically a similar process to AI. Okay, here's this long book. Here is a 1-page summary. Here's a 3-page summary. Here's a 5-page summary. And AI can do a pretty good job of that. A pretty good job. Can't do a great job. It's not going to deliver on insight. It might provoke insight, but it's not going to deliver on insight because it's not human. So, and that sort of led me to the talk that Clara and Karen did. And I'm just going to play that out to the end of the video. So if you want to crash the algorithm, go right ahead. That's just fine with me. If you don't watch this video to the end, I'll put the little branding that I always put at the end of the video, if in fact I have to have it undergo a certain process, and this will because I'm mixing video types. But it so struck me when they were talking about the conference. First of all, how when Clara got there, well, she's already sort of a little celebrity. And everyone around her is celebrities, except those who aren't seen much, but that seems to be managed pretty well. And then it was about being seen. Because I think what this machine addiction is creating in us, the loneliness, is because we're not seen. And so what this conference really did was people felt seen, and the Estuary process really delivered on that. And I thought they both, this little section of their conversation, articulated it beautifully. And so that's how I'll end the video. So leave a comment.
So you walk into this space, never having met any of these people before. What was your first reaction?
Well, I'd been to the barbecue the night before.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So like that was just like that sort of first reaction there, sort of kind of pulling up. I think we were together, like sort of rolling up to the barbecue, kind of, oh, okay, here we are, we're in the right space, right? And then I put my things, kind of in a corner, and I was kind of amazed for a minute just to sort of see, sort of like a first glance, like, oh wow, look at these people just happily sitting at tables, and I know you, I know you, I know you, and of course I'd never met any of these people, but I had been watching them for a few months. And then when people started kind of coming up to me and saying hello and knowing who I was, that's kind of cool. There's something special there where people really want to connect, And so, yeah. I mean, Nate's an amazing chef, right? So you were at the barbecue, Karen. What were you thinking?
Well, for me, it's always, like you say, it's kind of startling when you see people. I knew a lot of those people from conversations that I'd had with them on my channel, but a lot of them I only knew through watching them on somebody else's conversation. And there's something very, there's something very mysterious that happens when you walk into a space and there's real live people there. The first time it happened to me was when I was at the Chino conference about 1.5 years ago. And I met somebody that I had only seen online and had never actually talked to online. I met them in person, and it felt almost like there was gold dust falling from the ceiling in between the two of us, because that real person was so much more real. Well, I don't know if that's exactly right. There's also something, Jonathan Peugeot talked about this one time, about how when we're on these screens, there's a light behind us. So there's a light that comes through us from the screen. Mm-hmm. And so people are naturally kind of illuminated from within on the screen, which kind of adds to their persona, if you will. Even if you're trying your best to be a real person, a real, authentic, just normal human being, the fact that you're on a screen already gives you some kind of star power, if you would. Like when you walked into the barbecue and everybody's walking up, oh, Clara, I've seen you online before. It's
Yeah.
almost like a meeting of movie stars. Oh yeah, I saw your movie. I saw your movie. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but nobody's trying to like play it off or anything. It's just kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So you met all these people, and what was your impression of them?
Just what a gift, right? Because, sometimes you're a little bit anxious kind of going into these spaces, right? And you're like, oh, maybe this person doesn't like me, or, oh, this person and I might disagree about, this particular thing, right? But then, like you say, this kind of humanity of it, people met and there was no disagreement. There was no rehashing of whatever happened online. So that was, I don't want to say it was surprising to me, because obviously I would be very optimistic, right? About things just going absolutely well. But I felt, Karen, that things went just so beautifully well, just really exceeding maybe anybody's expectation, just how warm and hospitable. And is that what you were thinking?
Well, I'm just drinking it in. I'm enjoying what you're saying here. So the next day after the barbecue, you went into the larger room with all these people, and a lot of those people you'd probably never even seen online before. And yeah, so tell me a little bit about that experience. I'm also kind of, the reason I'm asking you these questions is there might be people watching thinking, oh, would I dare to go one of these conferences? What would it be like, And since you have kind of fresh eyes because you had never been to one before, and you haven't been involved with the little corner for all that long, and so you come to it with fresh eyes. Plus, you're coming to it with the eyes of a sociologist, so you have a kind of a unique perspective because you're also looking at it you have various reasons that you're kind of looking at this thing. So you can give us a viewpoint that not very many people can. So
Sure. Okay, so to tell you the truth, I was coming from my Airbnb, and I was just sure I knew the way, right? It was just past the Mormon church, right? And up this log cabin road. So before I got there, of course, I got very lost, right? Because I was coming on foot from this Airbnb. And so I got there before things started, but I was feeling like I was late. And just kind of, is this it? Is this the right place, And then this guy comes and greets me, and he doesn't have an official role. He doesn't have to greet me, but he says, "Hey, are you looking for the event?" And he kind of knew who I was, and just kind of showed me where to go. And I just thought that was just incredible. Incredibly kind, right? Because I am there. I'm a sociologist. I'm here to take notes or whatever, and here to meet people, and here to talk to people and be part of the thing. But also, I'll say it, what I've heard tons of other people say, I'm a little bit French, right? And then, yeah, I was just welcomed right in and shown right to the coffee, which is sort of, really what I'm also kind of secretly looking for, but afraid to say. And so they knew me, they knew what I was looking for, and they took care of it. They anticipated my needs and showed me exactly where to go. And so I found my Estuary group, and I knew someone in there. And so it was just a really warm kind of experience, which I wasn't expecting, honestly, because I'm not a churchgoer, and there I was in this church, So I don't know.
well, and we have to say, Nate set the bar kind of high for every estuary from now on, because on the first morning he had French pastries from a special bakery, and they were amazing. I don't know that that anybody's going to be able to beat that in the future. Whether maybe they can do that in Chicago. Get ready, guys.
Yeah. There's some good bakers out there.
So for the people who are listening who don't know anything about conferences like this, it's set up so that the main show really are these estuary groups, which are kind of small conversational groupings for people to, as one person put it, it's a place where you can come and talk about whatever is on your mind that you can't talk about anywhere else, because either nobody would be interested or it would be too fringe and you might be on the outside for wanting to talk about it. But at Estuary, you can talk about those things, and there will be people who will engage with you about these things. So it started with an estuary meeting even before there were any speakers on tap. And that gave us a chance to get to know like the 7 or 8 people that were in our group. So were you the only woman in your group?
No, there were actually 2 other women, there were 3 other women in my group. So it was,
They stacked your group.
they did. And it was pretty balanced in that way. What about your group, Karen? Who was in your group?
There were 8 of us, and there was myself and 1 married couple. So there was another woman, but all the others were guys. And I think there were some groups where there was just 1 woman. And because we are a little bit male heavy.
That's true. It would be a little weird to be a 1-woman group, I think.
Yeah, although I think all the guys were, very gracious, but they can get talking about their topics that they've been talking about on Discord for 3 or 4 years, and it can kind of get up in there.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're not familiar with it, you can feel a little bit lost, but yeah. I too was struck by just how warm all the greetings were from people. And for me personally, it was kind of funny because I tend to think of my channel as being a place where people come to learn about science and philosophy and things like that. But I discovered pretty early on in the conference that what people really wanted to hear from me were stories about my childhood, because they think of me as a grandma. And they want to hear about what it was like in the old days. So it was a good place to learn a little humility. And then I had to learn even more humility, because every time any of the gentlemen saw me walking up the steps to the stage, they came rushing up to help me as though they thought I couldn't make it up the stairs by myself. But it was cute. I mean, it was very cute, and I was very appreciative. But finally, by the last day, I was running up the steps so nobody would come and help me.
Good for you, Karen. Good for you.
So yeah, it was a lot of fun that way. It's fun to be surrounded by a lot of men who really want to be gentlemen and really want to learn how to be heroes and warriors and all of that. It's very fun.
Did you meet any guys who specifically, surprised you or stuck out to you?
No, I don't think they surprised me or stuck out to me. I mean, the guys that were attending to my elderly.
This is funny because you don't look elderly at all, right? Like
the guys who were attending to me were guys that I have talked to on the channel before in the past. And so, and they're just real gentlemen, like Corey and Jeremy. And I mean, I know there were others. I just can't think of right off the cuff right now. But it always amazes me. This is not the right word, because it's it's used as a pejorative nowadays, but they were very solicitous. They were concerned about my needs, and they wanted to make sure that my needs were taken care of. And, in normal life, you don't run into very many people like that. You just you have to do your thing, and you have to take care of yourself. And there's nobody around to kind of watch every step that you make and make sure that everything is okay. Maybe you got that when you were a baby and your mama was taking care of you, but when you get to be an adult, it's very, very rare to have so many people concerned about your every movement. And so that was fun. It was very interesting. But then you come back to real life, and you still have to clean the toilets at home and cook the meals and take care of things. So so your experience the first day started with the Estuary group, and then there were the speakers. And was that, when the speakers started, was that a different kind of a feeling than you get when you're in an academic setting?
That's an interesting question. Because I've been to a lot of academic talks, and this was really geared toward I think the speakers, especially you, Karen, were way more attentive to, this is how I want to engage with this group. rather than, and I think I heard you say something along these lines as well, just rather than like, here's what I have to say to you, and better stick in, this is the right answer, or whatever. And I really saw, especially from you, and then from others as well, maybe because I was attuned, because we had maybe talked about it, that you were looking for, is this right? You were looking for, what does this audience want to me? How do they want to engage with me? And I definitely saw you do that. And I definitely saw, I think, Michael Martin do that. And I think I saw Dr. Green do that. So I just sort of all these examples of what I would say is amazing pedagogy, right? Like, sort of anticipating, again, this sort of anticipation and attunement to, what do these people want or need, or how can they sort of bounce back and engage. I saw that rhythm kind of develop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was one of the things I was really amazed by was how Nate put that group of speakers together, because there were 6 speakers from widely divergent fields and widely divergent ideas. And yet it sort of made this thread that all tied together. I mean, I don't know how it happened, but the same thing kind of happens in an estuary group. When you're at the beginning, everybody gets to name a topic that they would like to talk about. And then we kind of negotiate or navigate which of those topics we're going to discuss. And generally, what happens is you find a through line that goes through all the topics and weaves into a larger topic that allows everybody to get to explore a little bit about what they were thinking. But at the same time, it allows the group to gather around a main kind of meta topic, I guess you would say. And that's the way it felt at the conference, that there's 6 different people talking about 6 completely different things. And yet you could see that the meta topic at the top that joined all of them together. And I think that must have been what was in Nate's head when he chose the speakers, which is pretty amazing.
It was so cool. And I loved just sort of this way that he approached it, from like, okay, we're going to have a couple of people who are clergy persons. We're going to have somebody who's very movement oriented, who's going to sort of show us maybe some grounding sort of techniques. I think that might be what Rafe was doing. And we're going to have these poets, and we're going to have music and poetry just interwoven into this way of this dialogue between the speakers and each other, and the speakers and the estuary groups. I really did see that rhythm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think one of the other things that makes it work is that the people who've been developing this idea of estuary have been training leaders for estuary groups for quite some time. So I believe that all the leaders that were kind of facilitators in the various estuary groups had gone through this training program. So they understood what it takes to allow people to open up about difficult topics, and to be willing to accept disagreements, and find a way to accept fringe ideas without, you don't have to sacrifice your own principles, and still you can find a way to communicate with each other and find meaningful relationship. So that was very beautiful. That was one of the things I really appreciated about the estuary groups.
Absolutely. I was amazed, Karen, about how just kind of, people engage that level of vulnerability that you don't see that in everyday life. And it takes, you kind of have to pull the thread a little bit to get that out of someone, or to navigate in that direction. But there wasn't any pulling here. People were ready to go. I don't see that in my sometimes in a community that kind of knows each other, but not in many other spaces.
Well, yeah, I mean, so at the very start of the conference, you sign in, you go into a meeting room with 8 people you've never met before.
Yeah.
And you're in the deep end of the pool in 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Was that scary?
Oh, was it scary? Yeah, because here's the thing. It's sort of the topics are going around, and like somebody shared something personal, and I'm over here like, am I gonna have to share something personal? I don't know if other people are thinking that, but you know, you kind of choose your own adventure. So it's a little bit more chill in that way. I mean, I felt like nobody was really pressured to share anything.
Mhm.
But there is a little bit of, oh no, kind of sneaky sort of, this is coming around to me and I've got this story. Do I share it? Do I not? Do I share it? Do I not? Maybe I'm the only one. Maybe I'm like sort of the cynic of the group. Um, but I guess there's a space for the cynic as well, I think, in the estuary.
Well, so what was the topic that you wanted to discuss? And then did you get to discuss it, or did they discuss some other topic?
I think we ended up discussing every single topic. But I was so interested as our group kind of went around, like people were sharing, oh, I'm an ex, you know, I belonged to this religion, or I belonged to that other religion, and then I left that religion. You know, that story sort of permeated our group. So many people had had that experience, or had experiences with divorce or other kinds of leaving. And so I was really interested in sort of, weaving those stories together. I guess that's a round two sort of question, I guess.
Mhm.
But in terms of people's stories, like that was just so interesting to me, as sort of everybody kind of had that in common, and that was sort of coming out just as we were getting to know each other. Um, and so that was kind of one of the themes that sort of, even the whole weekend, people kind of were looking at their identities in that way of, I used to be this and now I'm this. But I might have just been sort of primed to think with those kind of questions, right? Because that's very close to what I study.
So was that your topic then? When it came around to you and they said, "What do you want to talk about, Clara?" What did you say?
Well, okay, so this is a test of my memory here. What did I say? I'm sure I said something safe, something something that would be a good enough answer to make it clear that I took it seriously, but something that wouldn't be personal. But I don't remember what that was. Probably because, you've been in a group like this, Karen. You got to say something that's safe. I don't know. That's the truthful answer. And I'm sure other people
Well,
might.
here I'm pushing you, pushing you, and then I'm trying to think myself, what was my topic? And I can't remember.
Because I think maybe that's the genius though of it coming around and around and around. Because for me, the first time, I'm always going to say something safe. I'm going to go with the estuarily topic and suggest better snacks or something like that, right?
Yeah. Or for me, sometimes the something safe is some big idea that I'm thinking about. Because if we're talking about some big idea, that's not going to get too close to what's, down in here, or some aspect of life that's hard to handle. Because we can talk about ideas. Ideas are always safe, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
this is what the speaker was thinking, and it's far away from my daily life.
Yeah.
So now that we're both sort of saying that, it's kind of strange then how we ended up talking about lots of really personal things. How did that happen?
It is interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the magic of Estuary, really. It's the magic of it. Partly because the first round is where you talk about who you are. So you introduce yourself, right?
Mhm.
And then after you introduce yourself, at least this time around, in a normal estuary meeting, that first round would be maybe 15 minutes. But this time we had an hour, I think, for the first estuary meeting. So
Mhm.
that getting to know each other was a little bit more extended, which allowed maybe a little bit more personal information to come out in the getting to know each other thing. So then by the time you come around to the topics in the second round, which I believe was 2 hours, we had 2 hours in the second session, which is a long time to be able to have a group conversation. There's a lot of space for interaction to take place. So during that second round, when people started bringing up topics, then we could say something like, "Oh, I can see why that topic would appeal to you because you're working on this project over here in your job, or you live in this area, or we knew something about each other personally, so we could relate what they were thinking about to who they were as individuals. And so right away, you're starting to make all these connections and weaving everything together. And I think that brings everybody into a place where they feel very safe because they're starting to feel known. I was really struck, I did that conversation with Kara and Lauren earlier, and I think it published yesterday. And both of them said, I've never been in a place where I have felt so seen.
Yes, I saw that. Yes.
And I thought, wow, that just captured in a one sentence what was really going on there. Because you didn't feel like a face on a screen. You didn't feel like some unknown entity who's just attending a conference and hoping to sit in the back or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You were seen as a person, as a human being, as someone, you know how Jordan Peterson always says you should take care of yourself as though you're someone who's worth taking care of, just the way you would take care of a family member or even take care of your dog. You should take care of yourself that same way, because what that means is you're seeing yourself as somebody valuable.
Mm.
They were saying in this environment, other people were seeing me as somebody valuable enough to pay attention to and to want to come in contact with, maybe even come in contact with the messy parts of me and recognize that that's still valuable, right?
Yes, yes. And then as just like a next step from that stream, sort of, then I started to see myself. I thought I heard one of those people say, as somebody who could be seen. I
Mm-hmm.
thought, wow, that's the transformation right there.
Mm-hmm.